that. Now you know the weather that the person was in when they made this posting. So now Jonathan Harris takes it more way past where I can with the visualization.
Well, you'll find the right.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You'll find the right programmer. But are you familiar? Anybody familiar with? I think it's Post Secret. The Post Secret has gotten to be incredibly popular. There's books now that have come out based on the submissions that people send in, and oftentimes it's, I guess you post a secret, or you post something about your life, or you hate your teacher, you hate your your boyfriend, whatever it is, right? Some are good, some are bad, some are clean, some not so clean. I can see the potential that something like this, because it has a niche and it has a popular niche, could easily catch on, like something like Post Secret has. But you will probably, you add the blog to it, you add another dimension that you don't have, which are some of the stories behind these comments. I don't even know if some of your people even know that you're doing this.
Oh no, I'd tell you the vast majority of them don't.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we're going to transition. Well, first of all, thanks. Next up, J. Kyle Fagan. I call him the Renaissance man because when I first met him, electrical engineer from Texas A&M, you would think on the left side of the brain, and then I met him in sort of the right side of the brain capability, where he was working on an MFA and doing a lot of design and product definition. J. Kyle is, what I'm interested with what he's doing is he's actually visualizing words, text, data, and numbers. And so this has become a very popular area. There's stuff known as fractal art, and that's been around for quite a while. But what people are able to do now is they're taking the data and the stuff that the digital world is creating, like a lot of numbers, a lot of ones and zeros and things like that, and beginning to visualize it so we can see what all these numbers look like, what they might represent. Popular ones are those big starbursts that you see with the internet, with biology and things like that. And so he's beginning to visualize, and I think we're going to see that. He's turning some things into art, and you can end up probably finding a poster, or you'll be showing something at the Modern in New York or something like that in the future. But
you can arrange that.
Yeah, I'll work on it. Okay, so without further ado, I'll let J. Kyle now
Thank you.
have the floor.
I think John is exactly onto what I'm going to be talking about, which is using data to kind of define the piece itself. John's not going in there and pruning which post he's going to take and what's exactly right. He wrote the framework and is allowing that to push data right out to the audience. So I'm going to be talking a lot about programming and art, which typically in our sort of industrial education way that we were all raised, those two things never were supposed to have anything to do with each other. There's a history of them. People, as soon as computers came around, as soon as we had monitors and printers and stuff, people were playing around with art and programming. But by and large, when you were a kid, they said, well, if you're really logical thinking, you're going to go and you're going to be in the math and science kind of world. And if you're a little more creative and you like stories, then you'll probably end up in the history and literature. And if you're really creative, sort of quote unquote, or you drew really well, then you were a painter, or you would go into the dance and that kind of stuff. And that all went until you got into college, and then you were in the School of Engineering, and then you were in the School of Literature and the School of Fine Arts. And these guys over here went on to make lots of money in the defense industry, and these guys all went on to be professors, and these guys went on to live in communes. And nobody talked to each other. But over time, especially really in the past I would say 4 or 5 years, people have been pushing these cultures together and saying, no, actually it's really important that we talk. And you have to have an engineer talking to artist guy, and you have to think like engineer and artist guy at the same time. And that's where all these new arts and the visual design and the new product design, all that's coming out. So programming is art. It's not a new concept, but it's something that's really taken off over the past 10 years.
Well,
or so.
but we're programming as art. We're beginning to see things that look like art and not just ones
And not
zeros.
just ones and zeros. Yeah, I mean, 40 years ago, there were people playing around with the oscilloscopes, right? And like, I can make it a bird fly around. And okay, that's cool, right? But where's the art? And that dialogue happens. And tonight, when I say art and artist, I probably also mean design and designer, but it's a little too late for me to have that conversation. You know what I mean? So they're interchangeable. But programming as art, there's two things happening. There's the code itself, which is like a narrative art, and it's hard. It sounds funny when you first start talking about it. Code being if statements and then statements and just defining variables, all the stuff that the computer science kids all learned as a narrative, and thinking about it as that's the story part. That's the part that is going to describe what the aesthetic part comes out as, right? So you have all these characters doing their things, and in the end you end up with usually images or video or sound, combinations of all three. Or, like John had, word, right? And so the more you focus on the aesthetic side, the more you actually gain an appreciation for the sort of poetic narrative side, which is writing the code. And I was thinking a lot tonight before I came up here, like, what's the point to all this? I think the point to this is you should all be doing this. Like, it's not, as it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, it's not something that is just for computer science kids. It's anybody can do this. I wasn't a programmer 2 years ago. Now I'm a software designer and I program as art. It's something that's accessible. So I'll walk through some of the stuff I've done and talk about data as art and programming as art and show some pictures. So I'll start with this is the first thing that I really thought about and worked on. The code behind this is dead simple. And it's like, okay, one, it's kind of cool just to be able to get words and bar charts on the screen at the same time, and that was really exciting for me. But we live in a world that, I'm going to blame this on Microsoft. I'm just going to put this out there. Microsoft gave us tools to make charts and graphs, and anybody can do it really easily. And then everybody started doing it, and now we graph really silly stuff. And we have bar charts that don't mean anything. We have pie graphs that are worthless. We can call this a commentary on that. This is a graph about the length of words, and it is a graph about the length of those words. But I still think it's really cool. I would probably print this out. I think I will actually print this out and hang it on my wall. Which for me, that's like the baseline for art. Like if I can hang it on my wall, I'm pretty happy with it. So that's like the simple thing. That's the basic. Like I got my programming to work and I got code to generate image and that kind of stuff. So this got a little more complicated. This is actually, I work, like when I show up between 8 and 5 at this place, my job is to write reporting tools for a financial investment company. We report how well your investments are doing, which lately, all our graphs go down. But, so I came home from work one day and I thought, all we're doing is line charts and bar graphs, and half of them probably don't mean as much as the people reading them think they do. Again, it's like, what if we did this and it was something I wanted to hang on my wall? And that was my approach. So this is actually, all those little white dots are transaction dates when you bought or sold. This is actual data from our development database. So it's real numbers, but they're not like your numbers. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not a real person's numbers. But those are dates that you buy or sell stock. And then on the final day here on the right-hand side, it's what was your return on that investment. So this is something, again, something I would hang. I have a specific taste in art, so you might not hang it on your wall. But it's something that could be hung on a wall. And but it's also driven entirely by the data. So as a programmer, I told the story. I said, if you get this kind of number, you're going to go up. If you get this kind of number, you're going to go down. If you're a technology stock, I want you to be blue. But if you're a energy stock, I want you to be red. So I tell the story, and then allow it to grab the data, process it, and pump out an image. There, so that's